etc.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're just giving it a couple of minutes as you all come in, but thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. It's looking like the numbers are slowing down, so I think we'll get started in the interest of time, and then I'm sure others will come in. I'd like to first start by introducing myself. My name is Emma Gibbons, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Volleyball BC. And joining me tonight is our Head of Programs and Pathways, Adrian Goodmurphy. And then we have the team from Sport for Life who have been working with us. So Tom Jones and Tawana Lewis Harrison are also on the line. And finally, we have our technical director, Kelvin Ma, if anyone has any questions for him. So I'd like to start, I guess, and kick us off by acknowledging that we are coming to you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish First Nation. This is where our offices are based, but we are fortunate enough to play and enjoy working and participating in volleyball across this entire province and all the territories that belong with it. So we're very grateful for that today. We are so excited to have this meeting with you all to finally disclose some of the work that we've been doing. I think it's probably a good year ago now that we kicked off this process, and we decided to go ahead with a competition review to really look at how we best set up our competition structure for future sustainability and growth. I think speaking to you all as club directors, you're very, very aware as we are and how popular volleyball is and how much there is demand for it and how we have at times it has been a struggle for us as Volleyball BC to keep up with that demand and to facilitate the type of volleyball experiences that we really want our youth to experience. So this time last year, we appointed Sport for Life and embarked on a bit of a journey to hear from all of you and other groups about how best we make these changes. And I'm very, very excited to share with you tonight some of the themes that we heard and some of the recommendations that we have received from Sport for Life, and then also touch upon what this means for the forthcoming season. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Tawana to walk you through the process so far. Oh, a couple of housekeepings, actually. I did want to also say that the chat is available and the Q&A are also available. So please feel free to put your thoughts or questions in that, and we will endeavor to answer them either as we go along or at the end. Thank you. Tom, over to you.
Okay, Emma, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking a moment here on a Wednesday evening to join us. We've got lots to talk about. This is an information session, and I'm pleased on behalf of Sport for Life to be able to give you an update. It'll be followed a little bit by Adrian Goodmurphy from Volleyball BC around some of the outcomes and next steps on things. So if you don't know already, Sport for Life is a nonprofit that's been working for the past 10, 15 years in the Canadian sports system, largely focused on quality sport and physical literacy. We're the architects of the Canadian Sport for Life model, so we're very experienced in terms of stages. And I'll say up front here, this is a competition review in the stages of an athlete's career that are just very, very sensitive. The ages of say 12 to 17, 12 to 18. Those are the periods of time when athletes and young people go through a lot of changes physiologically, and in the volleyball sense, the technical, social, emotional sides of things, and then of course strategic, tactical sorts of things. But it's a really important piece, so we're layering in as much of those considerations as we can. Those stages relate to what we say in LTAD language, the train to train and learn to compete stages. So as you'll see in Volleyball Canada's long-term athlete development model, you can see a lot of references to those stages and those particular considerations. So with that in mind, let's jump into the agenda. So the purpose of this session really is to give you that information from this study and interaction that we've had with Volleyball BC. We'll take you through some of the process that we've gone through regarding the competition review. We'll go through some survey findings and recommendations, and then Adrian will take it away with some thoughts around the actual changes. And I'll emphasize up front, these are going to be phased changes. There's nothing's going to massively change, I don't think, in this, in the next month or so. I think there will be phased changes here, but again, it's to address the very good challenge that Volleyball BC has and volleyball in general has, which is growth, the explosion of interest in our sport, which is wonderful to see, but it does create some challenges. And then we'll follow that up with some questions and answers. So on to the next one. Yeah, the deliverables that we've received as the, I guess, the facilitators for this competition review involve generating recommendations to address the growth that we see in our sport, improve the efficiency of operations and activities, look at the structural pieces of volleyball in BC, look at the affordability piece that is clearly has come out as a major factor, and all designed to enhance the participant experience and keeping in mind some of these stages I mentioned a bit earlier. Ultimately, it's to design to collaborate with Volleyball BC to look at the implementation of such things. And Adrian will walk us through the considerations that Volleyball BC is keeping in mind around some of these recommendations. Ideally, minimizing disruption, of course. So let's talk a bit about the process now itself. So our stages and our steps in doing so was, first of all, getting our minds and our heads around what does the project actually entail, the scope, the size, the range of work that needs to be done. So really understanding the project. Following that was looking at how do we reach out to the community and actually find out what people think. So the engagement piece, and I'll talk you through that in a little bit, is we went through a number of different ways to do that. Then we looked at how will we analyze and create some thoughts around some opportunities that might exist for Volleyball BC, as well as some of the challenges that are out there as well. All culminating with some recommendations, which I'll walk you through in a bit, and then ultimately to work with Volleyball BC to create an implementation plan. So let's go to the understanding the project piece. Our idea was here, our challenge, our job really was to look at the scope of consultation that would really give us a sense for what the community is feeling. Sampling, looking at the representation targets, who would we reach out to? What's the budget scale of this project in order to do that and establish a plan. So I'll walk you through in a little bit here the types of things that we did, and you'll see a few there, town halls, surveys, etc. Ultimately, in that survey, we were generating questions that would connect to what the HR impact, in other words, what's the staffing impact on volleyball in terms of this growth that's happening? What are the capacity issues that relates to facilities, that relates to staffing, that relates to finding the way to communicate information out to you as well. And then, of course, things like equity, diversity, inclusion, access, those sorts of considerations as well, to make sure that that environment is really a positive one for athletes, for parents, for coaches, referees, for everybody involved. And ultimately, look at the way we're going to look at the data as well. So I want to take you to a slide now that is a little bit of a summary slide, but it should give you a sense of the things that actually happen over, and you'll see on the side there, from July of last year through to the current day. So we with Volleyball BC, created a working group, and I want to just do a quick thanks and shout out to those people. If you're on the call, feel free to smile, and and we're really happy you were involved. Things like people like a board member, I think it was Norm Hansen, involved, a number of club directors, and we really thank you for your dedication and involvement in this. Coaches, many filled out this survey as well, and then of course the Volleyball BC staff as well, who did a lot of work on this whole project and were very, very helpful to us as facilitators. Um, so we formed the working group. We defined a lot of the project. We decided how we would consult and do an environmental scan, and we also reached out to other PTSOs, other provincial territory sport organizations, so other volleyball associations across the country. We surveyed, and I'll get into more detail about the survey itself, but we had a good response there. We had a lot of focus groups. Every region was contacted, athletes were contacted, coaches were contacted. We reached out to facility owners, but we'll run through those for you in just a little bit here. And ultimately came through with some recommendations, which we've been bouncing back and forth with Volleyball BC on. And ultimately, we'll come back to Volleyball BC to decide what's implementable and what maybe needs to wait. Um, so that's kind of where we're at. In a nutshell, that's kind of what the project has looked like so far. But I do want to just touch on a few things before I get into more detail, jump into a couple of things in terms of the survey itself. And you'll see on the screen now the nature of the representation, for example. So you'll see each of the regions was the response rate there was quite strong, and I think quite representative of the population around the province. And you'll see also on the other screen, or the other chart, the response populations. So athletes, parents, coaches, large representation from parents, as you would expect. This cohort of participants from 12 to 17. Again, a lot of parents very interested in that. Parents involved in a lot of different ways. Lots of coaches and athletes. We know referees and club leaders are busy doing the business. And so I think overall, we felt it was, up in the 15 to 20% response rate is pretty strong. So quite happy with that response. The other piece of engagement I wanted to touch on today with you is the nature of that outreach. So we worked with athletes, coaches, directors, and referees to do a focus group, usually about an hour and a half. Really good response, really good engagement, and learned a lot. Some very good insights coming out of that. Those of you who are club directors will know that we've reached out a number of times, and we've been in touch with members and directors from all 5 regions. We did take the extra step to reach out to some of the system partners for Volleyball BC, including BC School Sports, iSpark, which is Indigenous Sport and Physical Activity Council, a number of sporting organizations from volleyball across the country, as well as I think, a really important connection with Volleyball Canada, who are annually organizing nationals and are setting the standards for a lot of things in terms of play and types of adaptations to the game. So very helpful conversation with their competition people. We also wanted to reach out to some of the key operators for volleyball in the province, and you'll see them there: TradeX, Richmond Oval, Harry Jerome Center. Those facilities that really do work closely. And again, just a quick note on facilities, very, very positive feedback from those facility operators about their interactions, both with Volleyball BC and with the volleyball community. So very keen to have people come back, and we really talked a lot about what adjustments could be made in a bunch of different ways to make that experience even stronger, but very positive response there. The other piece is just on one of the questions that we asked was about change. And I think people have probably heard through the grapevine that because of the incredible growth in volleyball, that there needs to be some adjustments made for varying reasons. And so we asked the question, how open would people be to change? And the respondents came back with about 77% believing that some different pathways of competition could be explored to help manage that growth and maintain quality. And about half of them felt that different formats could be justified. There could be other ways to kind of do this. And I'll say also that generally the population feels that Volleyball BC and the competition structure is operating quite well, but very open to other ways of looking at it. So that's some of the premise that we looked at as we proceeded with this. And then the other piece was on travel. We asked a lot of questions around travel, and we realized that people were interested in traveling. About half of them were interested in traveling, but it was kind of based on Traveling to where and how far and how long and those sorts of questions. Um, and so it was kind of one of those conditional ones. And so we know travel is an important piece here with the obvious reasons for cost and time away and all of those sorts of things. Ultimately about 35-40% felt that they would prefer to play more local tournaments, more regional events if they possibly could. But travel is certainly a piece of this of our sport and of this whole competition experience. So volleyball BC is as one of their priorities now is trying to balance that desire and importance of travel with those other considerations that people have very clearly said do concern them. So let's talk a bit then about the recommendations and how we were generating them and putting them together. As I mentioned early on, that long-term athlete development and physical literacy at this particular stage, from 12 to 17, is really important. Um, as I mentioned, for those reasons that it's a sensitive time for athletes, their bodies, their whole surroundings. We wanted to layer in the considerations that you'll see there around AI and climate change, largely in terms of travel and ways of getting to and from, also the facilities themselves, and those are considerations Volleyball BC takes quite seriously. We wanted to assess this whole idea of recommendations in terms of implementation, and that's the stage that we're kind of at right now. What is reasonable? What is something is just not even considering, doesn't make any sense to do, but what is reasonable and how will those things be kind of layered in? That's the stage we're working at right now. So implementation plan, as I say, is the working committee. The staff are working to identify a bunch of different factors that Adrian will take you through. But we're very clear, and Volleyball BC has been very strong about this, that all of this needs to be done in collaboration with clubs and key stakeholders. The transition piece, as required, will be really important, and of course, communications will be really important. Part of the reason we're having this session with you tonight. Um, and of course, as changes, which inevitably do happen, as they do occur, we want to make sure that there's a mechanism in place to let everyone in the community know, have their say, and keep things moving along in a collaborative kind of a way. So, with that in mind, let's jump into the overview of the survey and the findings. So, over 1,800 responses, as I say, is a strong response rate. You'll see the respondents there, robust engagement across the province. Every region had what we felt was a really engaging and kind of lively session. Lots and lots of feedback, both through the survey and through the focus groups. Clearly a strong community interest in this and a desire to be part of the future. We just find that people in volleyball are keen to contribute. It's a team sport. They want to find ways to make the experience better, and they're willing to put put the commitment in and the time in to make that happen. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the things we heard that are working well. So 90% of people are happy and enjoy the competitive experience. There's lots of things that people have that they'd like to see changed or tweaked, but generally people are quite happy with the current experience. The issue is going to be as it grows, can that be sustained? Can it be tweaked? Do we need to change that sorts of thing? Those sorts of things. There's very strong support for a continued high quality of play the tournament atmosphere. So the events in Tradex and in Richmond, the Richmond Oval, as you see the Super Series and provincials, people love to be together, and often the genders together, the age groups together, all in the same kind of a building. We've seen that and heard that from other provincial sport organizations across the country. It's a festival environment and one that is very, very positive, and something that people would like to see continued. The community, the connection amongst teammates and the community there. We heard a lot from athletes around the importance and the enjoyment that they have from being around others and the enjoyment they have from that festival environment. And also quite happy with the organization and communication related to the release of schedules, the updates, those sorts of things, which I know have changed over the last couple of years in a positive way around provincial championships and major events in particular, that was highlighted by a significant number of people. So that's something I think that's really, really to be proud of. And we wanted just to point that out to you. So let's jump into the recommendations. And we've got a couple of core ones And then we've got another a series of other recommendations that support the core recommendations, and some are at the very end of this. Some are a little bit more blue sky that we things that we heard both from people in British Columbia, but also from Volleyball Canada and from other provinces that why don't you try? Why have you thought of this? Why don't you try some things here? So let's jump into the very first one. So the core recommendation is looking at, as you'll remember, a large appetite for change. So the idea here is for Volleyball BC to consider separating some streams. So looking at the intent of why athletes and participants actually play the sport. So a stream one could be around a focus on development, fun, and an accessible competition, aiming mostly to the provincial championships, or maybe not, just really wanting to be involved in this purely for that enjoyment and fun, that being around friends and playing. It's competitive, but it's one where it's not focused solely on performance and got to get to the next level and really perform at that at that at that level. Stream two is one we are suggesting is more performance focused. So for those teams and those athletes that are really heading towards national championships, where they're training the level of and frequency of training and nature of training maybe more focused, maybe more intense, but they're focusing on a different goal. So that's some of the core recommendation around the separation of some streams. We haven't suggested a name for it, really, just that they be separated. Volleyball BC will be, I'm sure, thinking about what those names might look at. Also, looking more at tiering competitions by skill and region to ensure that those matchups really are meaningful. And when we say meaningful, of course, we mean meaningful competition, less blowouts, less one-sided matches where sometimes athletes don't learn anything. It's actually more discouraging than it is enjoyable, and really just reducing those kinds of disparities. Volleyball BC's worked hard on that already, and we're continuing. We're going to encourage them to continue to do that. We heard that event formats are important, and so we're suggesting those one-day events, prioritize those for regional and local teams, so less travel, have that time, so people can get back in time for school the next day if it's a Saturday event. But prioritize that for regional play, whereas the two-day events more targeted for the travel teams, the Super Series, those sorts of things, where they have time the amount of time to play, not a massive number of matches, but they get the competition that they actually need to improve to the level they want to be at. The last one is one that we've suggested. We've heard this in another couple of provinces who've piloted this, but volleyball in BC seems quite well positioned to create a house league system. And by that we mean a house league within a particular club where teams are formed, training happens, competition happens, but it's really within that same club or within the same regional area. And ultimately, the possibility exists where those house league systems could then compete against other house leagues, other clubs and other house leagues around the province, maybe regionally based, and have really create kind of a festival of house leagues. And it could be like a mini provincials, really, for those that just have no interest in traveling or decide they don't want to travel. But it's also a way of keeping people engaged, because we did hear a lot that shortage of coaches, shortage of facilities, difficulty of kids are getting cut from teams. Is there a way to keep people involved in here? And house leagues may be one solution for this. So that's one of our key suggestions. So let's jump into the second of our recommendations in the area of season scheduling. Um, for the most part, people feel that the season length right now is about right. We know that other provinces have longer, Ontario in particular, have longer seasons. Others have slightly shorter seasons. Um, Longer seasons have their pros and cons. We also know that other provinces have their school seasons tend to overlap, and those create a lot of problems. Again, sensitivity of physiology of kids. Um, we heard in BC that people feel that it is about right. Maybe adjusting timing to better support development as needed, but generally the season seems to be, people feel quite comfortable with that season. They did like the idea of moving ranking tournaments to a little bit later. finding that people felt that they had to perform very, very quickly, very early in the season when the team really hadn't been formed yet, really weren't performing, and the results there were affecting the rest of the season in a pretty significant way. So we've suggested moving them to slightly later in the season to allow those teams to get their complement of players in place so that they feel like they have a really good shot at that first tournament. Consider the idea of separating provincial championships, maybe, those that are going for provincials and those that are going to nationals based on that two-stream idea. Um, we've sort of concluded that keeping those provincial championships the way they are for the most part at this time makes the most sense. As I mentioned earlier, people really enjoy that festival environment. If, however, though, the demand, the numbers and the teams get so large that facilities cannot handle it in one place, then that's a possibility. But it would really, when demand exceeds capacity, that might make some sense. And then ultimately, alternate models for seasonal plans and flexible entry. You know, clubs will determine what their seasonal plans are going to look like. That could be travel to the States, it could be to different provinces. So there may be other models to look at for putting seasonal plans together. And I know Volleyball BC is very open to assisting with those sorts of things. And club directors need only, I'm sure you talk among club directors talk to each other around how they plan their season. So there may be some things there that need to be considered around seasonal planning. But that's some thoughts around season scheduling. The other piece on slide number three, Tawana, is around system leadership, and this is more relating to Volleyball BC itself. And so we've suggested that Volleyball BC could certainly look at a little bit of a shift in terms of delivery by focusing on sanctioning events, mentoring clubs, and helping build capacity in clubs to allow them to take some of that load off of Volleyball BC. Volleyball BC still plays that governing role, a governing body role, but kind of helping to delegate some of that responsibility out to in a sanctioning sense to again to help relieve some of that capacity issue. The regional development coordinators have a very, very important role in the system to play. They do a lot of work now and a great job on that. There's more I think that could be done, or we think that could be done around reaching out into the system to help find more coaches and more referees, empowering them to help grow the clubs themselves, help how to create new clubs, how to create different things by the clubs, and also open up things within facilities. And as I mentioned earlier, we did speak with other system partners such as BC School Sports and with the Recreation Parks Association around facilities, community centers, those sorts of things. So the coordinators who live or are near to the region that they're working in have a really important role in order to help unlock some of those avenues to help address some of the growth here. Supporting clubs to host more events. That's a possibility, and I know we do a lot of that already. I think there's more that can be done, and because Volleyball BC has run a lot of events themselves, including large and small, they can play a role, a mentorship role in helping clubs who may not have that background, or maybe it's the first time they're hosting an event, to really give them both signage and supporting materials as well as a mentoring role to really give them the confidence to be able to host effectively. The other piece was around financial support. Significant number of teams do need to travel under the current system and likely through an altered system. There'll still be an element of travel. We know other provinces have considered this, and a few actually do have a travel subsidy. There are ways to do that if that's something that Volleyball BC feels is important, because we know from the survey that finances and costs are barriers to competing and to getting kids the level and the experience that they need. So this is one that we recommend be considered by Volleyball BC. And then under the slide number four, or the point number four under stakeholder development and engagement, these are just points that we've shared with Volleyball BC that we heard again through both focus groups and through our survey, that athletes do really feel they would love to see more support around mental performance, around things like, how do I plan my downtime? How do I recover in a really good way? What are some things that I should be looking at from a technical standpoint? There are things that can be connected to those athletes. The coach development pathway, I know that's underway. There's some things happening there, focusing on increasing the numbers of female coaches and leveraging new partners. There may be ways to reach out to partners that are active in this space, be they RBC, be they Jumpstart, Canadian Tire. There are ways there that I think that the development of coaches and the recruitment of coaches as well can be increased. And I think that's also connected into the regional development coordinators. Around referees, we did hear had a good, robust conversation a number of times with our referees. We heard things like improving referee training, preparing younger referees in a way that they feel confident, unthreatened. They feel like they've been through scenarios to deal with different and difficult situations. That they feel safe, and the issue of compensation. The other piece was around communication, making sure that referees are part of that conversation as rules change, as assignments happen, all aligning with the long-term athlete development principles that Volleyball Canada has laid out. Around parents, again, we had a large response from parents, and we feel again largely positive. Also heard that there's a need for ensuring that parents are well informed at the very beginning of the season around expectations of behavior, the kinds of things that will be tolerated and won't be, how to be good parents, those sorts of things. I know that some provinces have been working on these sort of videos and resources that they show at their intake and onboarding meetings. And so I think the possibility of working with Volleyball Canada is to create a kind of a generic one that could be used by provinces is one to consider as well. And then lastly, the education and partnership, continuing to keep the long-term athlete development principles in out into the system so that there aren't excesses or shortages around the levels of training and competition. It is a fine balance because you are dealing with young athletes here. So it's just making sure that clubs and coaches are very as educated as they can be around making sure that experience is not only safe but is an enjoyable one for athletes. And then other partnerships continue to build those. The feedback we heard from these partners, again, as I said earlier, was very positive, trying to find ways to work better together. Really appreciate BCRP or BC School Sports, very appreciative of the respect of the seasons that are there, very willing to help. And they also sit on a whole bunch of facilities, as everybody knows, from teachers to athletic directors. So that's very important. iSpark, our Indigenous partners, again, very interested. They do a Team BC program for NEG, and they also do a lot of development, both in the mainstream and in the Indigenous streams as well. But they also have access to a lot of facilities and have lots of coaches in there as well. So some thoughts there. So getting into my last couple of slides here, just a couple of things around innovation. Um, we suggested that there's a possibility for local league-based competitions for teams that are looking and focusing on nationals. Are there ways to have those teams compete in a way that prepares them better for nationals? Could there be a way of creating a JV style league for those athletes who are just in university but not playing a whole lot, but need that extra bit of competition? Are there ways to do that? There could well be. Again, a blue sky idea might be, given that volleyball, women's volleyball particularly, in BC and on the West Coast is growing. It's growing across the country, both in the States and in Canada and everywhere. Is there a possibility to build and create kind of a women's professional league out here in the West Coast? You look at the growth of women's soccer, the growth of women's basketball, with professional leagues being established. This may be a decent time. The women's national team is based here it trains here in British Columbia. Could be some natural fits there, and of course we're creating quite a cohort of very qualified coaches here that reside here in this province as well. And then lastly, the thought of sanctioning external providers, those third-party agencies that may be able to work in collaboration with Volleyball BC in alignment with Volleyball BC's ideas and programs to expand the offerings that we currently have for people wanting to play our game and come in and play volleyball. We know there are many instances where people do want to play. Either there's not a team, there's not a coach, there's not a time slot. How to expand that bubble to make it bigger and better for everybody involved. So there's just some thoughts around innovations and maybe a little bit of a dreaming and some blue skying, but I just wanted to share that with you. And then lastly, before I turn to Adrian, just some considerations that around implementation that Volleyball BC is going through. And, are these recommendations, which ones are feasible and in what time frame? How much effort and impacts required and what other priorities there? Again, I'll reiterate that this whole competition review and restructure project was designed to create recommendations that would then be looked at likely in phases. And the phases are to be determined by Volleyball BC, but they will certainly be communicated well in advance as and when rollout of those will happen. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn now to Adrian for some of those thoughts there. And thank you guys for following along, and I'm certainly available for questions when this section is over. Then over to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Tom. It, and just thank you so much for the work that your group did with us, the amount of consultation that you did throughout the province and the information that you brought back in. There was a great deal and large pile of information that we had to sift through. So I appreciate all the work that your group did. Once Tom came back to us with the feedback and recommendations, we took it in as staff and we were sort of ran it through an assessment matrix to determine how we wanted to move forward with all of this data. And so we looked at a few things, and Tom mentioned it in the last slide. Like the first thing that we looked at it was, is it even implementable? Is it something that we can do? Are there any variables outside of our control that might stop us from implementing it? So just taking a look at it from that lens, when could we implement it, which is the phased in approach? What's our capacity to manage implementation effectively? What makes sense to implement and when? And then what is the impact if we do implement it? Is it positive impact or will it negatively impact anybody? Is the impact worth the effort, the risk, or the cost? We had to evaluate that. How easy or hard will it be to implement? Is there enough value to move forward with the recommendations? And then lastly, what are the risks involved? Risk to the volleyball system, to athlete development, risk to our clubs, or risk to Volleyball BC? And that's whether we risks to implement it or risk to not implement it, and what does that mean for us? And so we pulled all that together and we created a timeline for implementation. And so you can move on, Tawana. Throughout the consultation process, we heard some very loud and consistent messages, which Tom had noted, that were part of the recommendations provided to us by Sport for Life. And these became the highest priority for us to implement and will be in place for the 2026 season. So some of the things we heard that teams want to have multiple streams of competition to provide them with the ability to play at their level. They want clubs and teams want to have the ability to choose to travel or not travel, and to give teams the ability to control the costs and commitment levels that come with that travel. And additionally, just considering that travel might be better off later in the season than early in the season, especially when you can have bad weather that affects those travel conditions. And lastly, the season schedule needed to be reviewed so that teams weren't being asked to perform at their peak level at the beginning of the season and had more preparation time. And then at the back end, adjusting the timing of our provincial championships so they better coincided with national championship dates. So for 2026, we've restructured the competition schedule to provide a preseason through January and the beginning of February, a ranking and competition season, which flows through the end of February down into the middle of April. And then we have a championship season, which is going to include provincials and nationals. That the big portion of this that we're really excited about. Partly it's the preseason competition where we're introducing single day play days for teams to attend in their region to give some competition opportunities prior to the start of the season. These competitions won't be ranking events. They'll simply be competition opportunities for teams to play, and you can choose to play or not play. You can choose to play in other events if you find them. If you want to go down to the US and play, you can choose to play in that preseason competition, and there won't be any events in your way to stop you from doing that. Moving into like the ranking and competition season, that could mean ranking tournaments. It could mean a Super Series tournament, and we're also creating one-day regional competition tournaments within your region to reduce travel requirements for some of those teams, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So those one-day tournaments in those regions are there so that teams aren't being forced to travel. They're not being forced to move into a Super Series format where they're traveling to each region. We have left that two-day competition format for teams that do want to have that experience, but we're removing some of those mandatory requirements for some teams, especially in the Division 3+, so that they can choose what works best for them, whether they want to travel or whether they want to stay locally. We did hear from a lot of teams that if the opportunity to play locally existed, they probably wouldn't travel as much. And then again, we are retaining the Super Series tournament structure for teams that still want that travel experience. And then we're moving into a two-stream competition structure for the girls. The girls 15 to 18U will have multiple tiers structured within it for teams to compete. There will be a mandatory travel component for some where you must attend events, and then on the other side, there will be less travel requirements. The boys competition structure is going to remain the same as last season. There's currently not enough boys to create some type of divisional structured play similar to the girls. We're getting close. We're almost there in some age categories, but we're not quite there. But we're looking forward to being able to transition them into a competition structure that works for multiple tiers. We did find, and we've seen a large growth in the girls game, especially after we created divisional play where teams could play at their level and they weren't required to compete against the very top teams in their division. I do want to say we will be releasing a full calendar and comp guide on Friday. We're just putting the finishing touches on the competition schedule. There are a lot more events to consider with the one-day tournaments that we are looking at in each region. It has significantly increased the amount of competitions that we are running. The hope is that as teams choose not to travel into the one-day tournaments, it puts less pressure on our Super Series events, which then allows us to maintain the integrity of those events. Can move forward, Tawana. So 2027 looks a little bit lighter, but there's a couple important pieces that we want to introduce here. The first, however, is that it's a brand new system that we're looking at putting into play for 2026. It has different requirements. It's similar to previous years, but there are changes to it. And so step one is just going to be evaluating the changes from the previous year and making any adjustments as needed. So because it's brand new, because we don't have a lot of history, especially on the one-day local regional tournaments that we're looking at running, there will be an evaluation process that comes with that. But the two big ones that we're looking at, number one is we want to look at developing and piloting some interclub house league system projects. And so that could look like either in a single region that Volleyball VBC would pilot it or within some select clubs. And just creating a system where those house league teams have an opportunity to participate against each other outside of their in-house club program to get a little bit of the taste of club volleyball without having the full cost and requirement of traveling to competitions. So it's a bit of a club system light, but just creating opportunities for club or for athletes that want to participate in something like that at a much lower cost and with much less rules and requirements. And then lastly, we want to look at piloting some sanctioned club run tournaments that can be used for ranking or qualifying. So creating a structure that will allow clubs to run tournaments and then use the results from those tournaments to rank teams into either future events or provincial championships, and seeing how we can make that work. Partly to reduce the pressure on our administrative staff that are running tournaments in the region, but also to give clubs that opportunity to that do have the ability or the want to run those tournaments to be able to do that and have them be part of the system where it means something. And then lastly, in 2028, we want to fully implement a house league system, an interclub house league system across the province. So after we pilot it, work out some of the kinks, clubs that want to be involved in this system would be allowed to be involved in this system. And ultimately what we'd like to do, and Tom referenced it, is at the end of the year or maybe partway through the year, have some type of regional house league festival where teams can come together and play. And so maybe there's one or two of those through the season so that those athletes still get that festival competitive experience without having to travel too far to get it, and have something that that's fun for them to attend and participate in. And then we also want to look at developing and piloting a league model for one age category. We've been talking about leagues for more than a decade, longer than I've been at Volleyball BC probably. So we're hoping to develop a model to pilot in 2028. It would likely be for a single age category just to provide some type of proof of concept, but we are looking at doing that. And then the last thing is the travel subsidy program. Tom referenced that as a recommendation as well. We really like that idea. We've been talking about it for a long time. And so we're going to put some effort into developing a subsidy program. Ontario runs one that's very robust. They do have twice as many teams as us and twice as many athletes, which gives them a little bit more resources to draw from, but we have some ideas around creating that. We thought about moving this to 2027, but we felt with the changes that were going in place this season, we wanted to make sure that we gave this the time that it needed to develop it properly and make sure that it was sustainable moving forward. So that's what the future holds based on the recommendations that we received. And this is a very high level view of what we're planning on doing moving forward. We will have a complete, as I mentioned, competition guide that comes out on Friday, which will answer your questions around what do those specific structures look like for each age group, where am I playing this year, what tournaments do I need to participate in, and all of those things that come with participating in the club season. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat, whether they're for me or whether they're for Sport for Life about the work that they did. You can also use the question and answer function if you have anything that you'd like to ask.
It looks like we've answered everything in this very condensed session. I'm not seeing any questions right now, but Adrian, as you mentioned, we will be following up to share this. We'll be sending it out to the club directors, correct?
We will. We'll be sharing this with the club directors, and we will have it posted for everyone to view.
Okay, great. So if people want to have some time to digest, because there was a lot there, and we will also share the slides as well afterwards, you might need a few minutes to look through and then come up with questions. I do have one question in the chat. Brian has asked, what does subsidizing travel look like? How would the funds be generated?
It's a great question, and that's why it's being held off till 2028. So we've looked at a couple different options. Ontario uses an option where they charge a surcharge on all of their tournaments and collect all that money in, and then they bring the money back out depending on the distance that you travel. So they have a minimum distance that you have to travel to receive the subsidy. We've also looked at some other sports that have some type of a fee added on to your membership fee, where you would pay like a development fee that would get added on and moved, be restricted as a travel subsidy fund fee out of the membership fees. So those are a couple that we're looking at, but we want to make sure that we do some robust research on that to make sure that we're exploring all of the options, and that will involve our clubs as well. We're few and you're many, and lots of you have played in other sports that might have ideas, and so we'll definitely engage with our membership to talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, but just to add on what you were saying, Adrian, when we looked at Ontario, they essentially collate a big pot, and then clubs will fill in a form that says which teams went where, and as Adrian said, there's a minimum travel distance, and then they calculate it out and it's reimbursed to the club. So it's to the club as opposed to like an individual person. And it does sound like it's a very well-oiled machine. And so, yeah, again, it's something that we'll be looking at and looking at other ways as well. Okay. Any other questions? Well, we have everyone online. I'm not seeing any. So we'll send the slides out along with the connection to this recording so that all of the club directors can see it and you can review the slides. And then obviously all of our materials for this coming season will go out on Friday too. And the regional managers and Adrian and Kelvin will be available to answer any questions that you may have.
Emma, could I just say one thing
Sure.
I just want to, on behalf of Sport for Life, thank Volleyball BC firstly for the opportunity to contribute to this, but I also want to thank those on the call, the club directors, coaches, everybody that was engaged and responded and gave your really constructive ideas to this whole project. This took more than a year from kind of inception to the present day. So really thank everybody for trying to find ways to make this sport experience for everybody involved a bit better. So from all of us at Sport for Life, Tawana, myself, Richard, and the team, a big thank you.
Yes, we would echo that too. It really has been a bit of a team effort from you guys at Sport for Life and us, and then obviously our community and the response, as you mentioned, the response back to being asked what people might want to see, it was really overwhelming. So we were so pleased that everyone was engaged in this process. So we're excited to start implementing some of these adjustments, and I'm sure that we will be doing more evaluation and more adjustments as things go on. But yeah, we're looking forward to moving ahead with it. Adrian, do you have any final words?
I don't. There was one more question that was asked talking about what the structural changes might look like. Sorry, and there was one that came in asking about if there were any changes to 12U to 14U. There will be some slight changes. There's actually probably a reduction in travel requirements for 13U. Not that there ever were, but with the introduction of more regional events, we're looking at removing some of those travel pieces for the 12 and 13U teams. We will run something, but it won't be as robust. The idea is to keep those teams more local. 14U will run a similar system to how it's run previously. The only other thing that I have to ask is if you leave this webinar and you decide that you do have a question, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer it if you have any questions along the way, and we'll do our best to get back to you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
No. Adrian.